All right. So I am going to get started with some introductions and some announcements, and then we'll get started. This will be recorded this evening, and will be hosted on the website. Just so everybody knows. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. My name is Samantha Johnston. I'm the Executive Director and Curator here at Colorado Photographic Art Center. We are a nonprofit photo center located in Denver, and we receive support from Bonfi Stanton Foundation, SCFD, Colorado Creative Industries, and for this exhibition specifically, exhibition printing support from Digital Silver Imaging, which we're so grateful for. If you are in the Denver metro area and have not visited the exhibition, which just opened on Saturday, please consider stopping by. The exhibition is on view until February 22nd, and it is both Christian's exhibit, Armed Doesn't Mean Dangerous, and the 2024 veterans class of our veterans program, Through Their Eyes, Personal Projects by Veterans. So two exhibitions up till February 22nd. This, as I said, will be recorded. I'm going to give a little brief introduction of Christian and his background, and then he's going to give a talk, and then we will have time for question and answer, Q&A at the end. So feel free, if you have a burning question that you want to ask while he's talking, just feel free to put that into the chat or in the Q&A feature, which you can see in the bottom toolbar. And I will go through all of those at the end and make sure we get all the questions answered. So now to introduce Christian Kaylee. Thank you for joining us. It was great. Christian and I got to finally meet in person over the weekend when he was here in Denver for the opening reception, which despite the Arctic blast was a great turnout. And Christian is a Chicago-based artist. He's also a veteran, and his work has been exhibited internationally. He's been honored by Silver Eye Center for Photography, Pictures of the Year International, Arnold Newman Prize for New Directions in Photographic Portraiture, Critical Mass Top 50, and Sony World Photography Awards. And we have 13 images from his series, Armed Doesn't Mean Dangerous, on display in the gallery. So, Christian, I'm going to let you take it away and get started.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let me go ahead and get my screen pulled up and then go from there. Okay. Can you see everything okay? Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Again, my name is Christian. I'm a lens-based artist based in my hometown of Chicago, and I'm excited that you guys joined us tonight to share and look at some work. Well, first off, I want to start with some thank yous. I want to thank the Colorado Photographic Art Center, starting with Samantha Johnston, for asking me to be a part of this and really just showing some great hospitality to artists and supporting my work. So I appreciate you, Samantha. I want to thank Megan Ross, Desa Beslick, Megan Shaw, and Juan Miguel Pinto Diaz. Um, you know, I enjoyed meeting you guys while I was there. I want to thank Deb, Samantha's family and friends, and every single veteran that I met while I was there. I enjoyed talking to you guys, all the artists, photographers that I met. You guys really made my visit to Denver warm. So thank you. I really wanted to start with this image before I get into any of my work because I think it's important to remember, for me to remember, to remind myself why I create work. And I always say, whenever I'm making a project or thinking about a project, I'm having a conversation with the child version of myself. The genesis for a lot of projects always come from like community and thinking about what did I not have the ability or the voice to talk about when I was younger? What could I not articulate? But now that I have a camera and people pay attention, what will I do with that? And this is me as a child, and this is the person I'm always talking to when I'm at the genesis of my projects. And this is an image of my father with my sister at the Bud Billiken Parade here in Chicago. And the reason why I'm showing you this photograph is because for me, again, like I mentioned, I'm always talking to my younger self, even when I'm just taking photos in the community. So the past image that I showed you was my father at the Bud Billiken Parade when I was a child, and this is me at the Bud Billiken Parade taking portraits as an adult. And whenever I'm taking images, I'm never taking images because I think it's pretty. For me, it's a spiritual connection. You know, to be at these parades like this or um, to have these community experiences in a lot of ways, like I'm connecting again with my father, like when I'm photographing these events, because my father used to take me here. These are the Jesse White tumbling team. And my father used to get so excited when he used to see them. And now to be an adult and actually get a chance to photograph that team, you know, at the Bud Billiken Parade, kind of reasserts that idea that for me, photography is very spiritual. It's a way to connect with my family, community, and the world around me. And here's an image I took from that day that I never, it's from my own personal archive. I never published it, put it online or anything like that. But yeah, I'm always out taking photographs and I just want to share this image. And it was important that I started here, you know, reflecting with my childhood or reflect how I reflect with my community when I'm creating art. Because I think a lot of times when people look at my images, it's so easy to feel like you kind of already got what I want to talk about already understood. And I think when people see my images, they're really only seeing 20%. You know, I'm showing this diagram. It's called the iceberg model. And if you could just like imagine like an iceberg, an iceberg in the water, and you only see the tip. You only see the tip of the iceberg. But under there, it's deep. You know, the iceberg goes very, very deep into the water. And I think that's what it's like when you look at my images. You know, you see 20% of what we're talk of what this is actually about. And I think artist talks like this is really important because it gives the opportunity to really inform why I'm making these images and what they're about. And when I think about one of the first times that I really realized what images could do on a national or international level, it was definitely the Ferguson unrest when I was in undergrad living near St. Louis, Missouri. And, you know, I was being in Chicago, I was always used to like police brutality in regards to citizens. Like I saw it a lot. I saw crime in regards to like law enforcement and their citizens. But this was one of the first times that I saw the community really reacting in this way. I think the community was fed up, and I just knew that I had to be in a community making photographs. And something switched in me because my introduction to photography was really documentarian approach. You after these images, I ended up landing an internship at the Washington Post, where I was able to refine my photography skills and begin. But the way that I was being introduced to photography was to like be unbiased. And I remember being conflicted with that, like as I rode in the back of this pickup truck or and diving myself into this community, I didn't feel unbiased. I felt biased. Like I had an opinion. I knew something clearly was wrong. And again, I think why I'm showing these images is like, it's because I think I went through like a glide path of trying to trick myself like I didn't care. Like I didn't care. And so the work that I'm making now, like it's clear, like I care and I'm not trying to avoid it at all. Um, so I need to back up some because I don't want to assume that everybody know what the Ferguson unrest is. So it was essentially when a Ferguson, Missouri police officer um killed a Ferguson, Missouri teenager, and the community went up into an uproar and it caused international protests. So, and again, I think this is one of the first times I was really seeing what images could do because this is an image like I snapped, like something was just like, like take this photo, Chris. But now I go back years later, this building no longer exists. And, you know, uh, this image just always kind of sticks with me because it just kind of like shows me like for me it kind of like images are important. They're ways to document history, document time, and then, future generations are coming up that don't even probably know about the Ferguson unrest, Ferguson protests, and the images like these will allow them to be able to see what once stood in these areas. And I think that's important. Photography to me is important in that way. So time passed. I joined the army and the COVID-19 pandemic happened. And while most of our attention was on grocery stores being shopped out, the COVID-19 vaccine, panic, I always focus on what are people not talking about. I think even when I think about my projects now, I always think about like what are people not talking about or what are people scared to talk about? And I think this is like one of those moments where I realized, wait, I haven't seen not one news article talk about these high school seniors who lost their prom because of COVID-19. Um, who lost their prom because of COVID-19. And like the community that I'm from, like communities like Chicago, prom is like right next under like maybe like a wedding. It's a big deal. People, the students come out, they get all dressed up, all dolled up, get their makeup done, hair done. And I realized that, hey, these seniors, these high school seniors were missing out on their prom. So what I did, I went into the community and I photographed students in the outfits that they would have wore to prom but never had the opportunity to wear. So this was actually giving them that opportunity to like at least not miss out on wearing their outfit. And again, like I was changing. Like when I first started my photography career, like I would never accept a gift from someone who I was photographing because I never wanted to make it seem like I was being biased, like that they were because they bought me a book that they could have an opinion in like what got published today or what I photographed. So that was like a internal rule that I made for myself. But this family kind of like broke that because like I was in the army, I was paying for my own photography equipment. I wasn't interning anymore. And I just decided like, hey, I'm paying my own money for this. I'm paying my own money for this film. I'm paying my own gas. I'm meeting these people myself. I'm buying these cameras. I'm buying these scanners. If somebody want to gift me with a book because they appreciate what I'm doing, I'm going to take it. And and I think little by little, my title of what I thought I was a journalist or a documentarian began to shade away, and I began to consider myself to be more of an artist. Because not to say that journalists or documentarians don't care, but I think I know that being an artist has given me more of a voice in the images that I'm making. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with y'all. So these some other high school seniors. And it was really important for me to have their family in the images as well because it was as if the families were holding them up during this time. And now I want to talk about my current series, Armed Doesn't Mean Dangerous, which I'm really excited about. And I think everything that I talked about from the beginning to here really like cultivated into this project, really. If I could give a really short, concise explanation of what this project is about before we get into it, I would really say it's about the complicated relationship between African Americans and the Second Amendment. And this is my father, who was a Chicago area police officer, and he really taught me about protecting myself. Protecting myself. He was one of the first people that I saw, black people that looked like me with the gun. And I think it was fitting to dedicate this project to him. And this book really informed this project. The second, Racing Guns in a Fatally Unequal America by Carol Anderson. She's a professor at a Emory College, and basically she really dives deep into law, into the Constitution, and she talks about the relationship between African Americans and the Second Amendment. And I want to read little bit of her from her book, and the passage that I'm choosing to read to you is super important because when I started this project, I was in the military. So when I was reading the book, it really things really started clicking for me why I needed to work on this project. It wasn't because I just wanted to show black people with guns. It wasn't because I supported guns, although I do own a firearm. Um, it wasn't because any of the things that I think that people really think about when they look at my images. It was really because I felt super interlocked in between this subject. And when I read this, it's gonna explain it more. You know, I was thinking about being from Chicago, but being in the army in Texas. I was thinking about the first time ever being able to hold a firearm was in the military. And I was comparing both of these places a lot, like Texas and Chicago. And I'm just gonna dive into the reading, and it maybe it'll make a little bit more sense after I read. So I'm gonna give you a quick explanation of what I'm gonna read to you, real quick. Just lock in. I ain't gonna bore y'all to death. It's just gonna be a short passage. But I was looking through my notes last night, and these two passages. This is totally impromptu. Usually I don't ever really incorporate this into my talks, but this stuck out so much to me when reading it last night and being refreshed on my readings that I wanted to share. So what I'm going to share with you is a script by Frederick Douglass, and he's gonna talk, and he's a pretty much the time period that we're in and that he's talking about is during the emancipation, shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation and during Black codes, where essentially Black people were being freed after the Civil War, and to Black codes were being emerged to pretty much keep freed Black people um, essentially enslaved. And then I'm going to jump to another passage by a Mississippi senator 50 years later. And this time we're in World War One. Um, so Now that I give you guys context, I'm gonna read the passage. So this is Frederick Douglass talking after during shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation and during this idea where black codes were forming. Frederick Douglass understood early on what this meant. He keenly observed, once you let the black man get upon his person the brass letters US, which stands for United States, which you can see them on me right here on my collarbone picture. Oh, I'm sorry, I get emotional. Once you let the black man get upon his person the brass letters US, let let him get an eagle on his button, which you can see on my buttons. You probably can't see it, but on my buttons there are eagles. Um, and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket. And there is no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship in the United States. African American soldiers were determined to fully embrace that citizenship, and in doing so, protect the freed people, slaves, who are being black coded and butchered back into slavery. The soldiers' mission to protect the nation's most vulnerable against the violence of traitors did not go unnoticed, nor was it appreciated. Yeah. Now I'm gonna hop 50 years after that, and a Mississippi senator, it's talking about black people joining the military again. This is more importantly, black people being access to guns. But you'll see what he says. When the war began, again, mind you, this is around World War One. When the war began, there was great concern about what it would mean to have a sizable number of black men in the armed forces. The undersized US military was simply not large enough to take on the fighting needs of the hell erupting in Europe. Congress therefore passed the Selective Service Act of 1917, which established a draft for all able bodied men between the ages of 21 and 31. Senator James Big Chief Vardaman of Mississippi, who had earlier bragged of his state's success in blocking access to the ballot box by eliminating the N word from politics, fought hard against conscripting African Americans into the military, arguing that it would be dangerous to racial harmony to arm African Americans. Vardaman skewed definitions of racial harmony, which was akin to that of Southern whites during Reconstruction, who wanted the black troops removed so there would be racial peace. The real concern was not harmony or peace, but rather that Southern whites did not want blacks to become trained in using weapons. So that's all I'm gonna read from there. Um, and I think that's important to know. Like, while I do take a little bit of pride in exercising these rights that I know that my ancestors fought for, and as a soldier who, when I look at history, I'm talking about like this idea of me being intertwined into this idea of the Second Amendment or firearms and this complicated relationship between African Americans and Second Amendment. When I think about like, hey, like, will I take access in this right? I'm thinking back to my ancestors who tried to join, tried to keep their firearms after fighting in the Civil War, but black codes came across that pretty much did allow that took their firearms away from them. Like, I just think that I would kind of be doing them a disservice if I didn't exercise my right. And I'm sorry, I'm losing thought. And getting back to why I'm documenting this, I think these two things like really summer it up. Like even Frederick Douglass's quote about, you know, joining the military and getting access to a certain American citizenship. I know that exists. I know, people look at me different because I'm a veteran. I know that I've experienced it. Um, being in Texas, you know, when I would get pulled over before I was a soldier, I felt like I had more of a hard time. But when they were a veteran, they saw my veteran license plates. I never really get pulled over and never really get a hard time. And I think it's about this idea of like having to do things to get acceptance, to get more access to my American rights that should have already been given to me at birth. Um, I'll leave that there. So I'm deeply entwined. I'm saying all this to say is that like I'm deeply entwined into this subject. It's not something I just chose to do because I like saw on TV. It's something that after reading this, after looking at my community, after looking at my experiences, I feel deeply entwined into this subject. And thinking back to groups like the Black Panthers and thinking about laws that were passed, like the Mulford Act of 1967 when a group of Black Panthers exercised. California was an open carry state. The Black Panthers, I don't want to assume that everyone knows who the Black Panthers were, so I'll share a little bit. They were arming themselves and patrolling their communities because they didn't trust law enforcement to do so. So they started arming themselves and doing um, neighborhood watches where they would actually watch the police and ensure that they were doing their job. And although California was an open carry state, once the Black Panthers went to the Capitol, laws were passed, such as the Mulford Act of 1967, which essentially snatched the rights of the Black Panthers to allow them to open carry and do these neighborhood watches. It was, I want everybody to go research these things for yourself. So I'm paraphrasing the best that I can. But, you know, groups that would typically be against like gun legislation or taking away rights were for it. And the main reason they were for it is not because they were trying to, not because they were trying to like, because they really cared about taking away gun rights. They cared about taking gun rights away from the Black Panthers. And I think that was when you compare the Black Panthers to other groups like the militias in America, um, like this example, the Clive Bundy standoff, where a group of militia group in Nevada took their firearms and armed it and aimed at policemen and citizens. And the way that these same groups that came out to pass legislation to stop the Black Panthers from carrying their firearms had a complete different tone against the Clive Bundy and militia groups today. And we can see it even today. We can see it even today that there's a different tone in which we um, talk about these groups. And I think what the real lesson behind this for me as a bystander looking is that there's a lesson being taught to me. There's a lesson being taught to me from history. There's a lesson being taught for me from this. This is that this firearm is not for me. This firearm is not for me. It's for a certain group. And I just refuse to accept I refuse to accept that. I'm not saying that there's somebody out there saying it, but I think it's an indirect message when you see things like this over and over again that you just choose to start to think like, hey, like I shouldn't touch this because when we touch this, we die. You know, laws are passed to stop us from holding this, from the Black Codes, from the Mulford Act of 1967. With all of this in mind, with all this in mind that I talked about, from how I'm interlocked into these subjects that I talked about, I I knew that there was something out there that I wasn't seeing. It couldn't be that my father was the only responsible gun owner on my block or in my community. So I started to search for gun owners, responsible African American gun owners, because I knew that they existed. And it's fitting that I start with this couple because they live in Texas, but they're from Chicago. And having conversations with them, they were telling me about how if they were in Chicago and they were to have a child, they couldn't see themselves wanting to teach them their their child about firearms because they felt like it was just too dangerous. And it's like to hear these internal struggles that I was having and to talk to them and see that they were having these same internal struggles, it just kind of reaffirmed to me that this wasn't something I was making up. This wasn't something that I was making up. And I'll leave it right there. And these were the images I weren't seeing. I remember my father, having a firearm in our fire home. But when I looked at the news, I didn't see, only time I saw people that looked like me around firearms were if they were drug dealers or gangbangers, or if they were like a detective or something. It was like, or a veteran or a soldier. It was almost as if you have to get access to experience what every American citizen already have access to. That was my perception before I started making these images, that I had to be a veteran to be okay to have this firearm. I have to join the police force, or I had to be a soldier, then it looks good with me. Or I always felt like this was something that was not designed for me to have. So I sought out and to find people that I knew existed, but I just wasn't seeing in the media or in images around me. So I want to spend some time talking about militia groups in the Second Amendment because I think it's this fantasy that exists that the Second Amendment was created to help America to be able to defend ourselves if like enemy try to attack us or something like that. And I think maybe to a certain degree that does exist, but to be very clear and straight to the point, the reason why the Second Amendment was created was to keep slaves under control. Because during this time, slaves were rebelling. Slaves were rebelling, and the South and the North were trying to form the Union. So during this time when the South's economy was created, um, the South's economy was created by free labor, say slavery, and it was going to be no way that the South was going to come into the North if they didn't have a way to protect their economy, which was free labor. Which was free labor. The North's economy really wasn't determined by free labor, so the South really didn't trust the North to say, hey, like if our slaves start rebelling, are you going to send the military down here to help us? Like, why would they when this is a fresh new relationship and their economy is not impacted by free labor as much as you guys are? So the South really wanted to have a guarantee that, like, hey, if we join this union, we need something to be able to keep our slaves under control, to keep our slaves under control. So that's really one of the main reasons why the Second Amendment made it into the Constitution. And militias, the idea of the having this that we hear sometimes, the idea of having like militia groups that can like stand up to like great foreign threats. Militia groups were at this time were known to be largely ineffective, sloppy, not great at fighting a large standing army. That's why we needed the Union so we could have one large organized fighting force, you know. And I think this is what this book talks about. The only things that militias were really good at was putting down slave revolts. Was putting down slave revolts. So I think this is important to talk about because it really reshapes what the Second Amendment is about, what militia groups is about, and really recenter this conversation around African Americans in the complicated relationships of the Second Amendment. And moving back to Chicago, like I was able to start like meeting people like her who had their own was a firearm instructor and was teaching people in the community how to how to how to responsibly utilize their firearms, how to get access to their FOI card. A lot of people in Chicago, in my communities, like think about it, like the same people that you think are oppressing you, how do you now go to them and say, hey, may you please give me a FOI card? Like, I want it now. Like, that's complicated. I know that sounds weird to do, but talking to people in the community, like I know that this is something that they're struggling with. Like, how do I look at somebody who's oppressing me as the same person that I have to go to and ask for access to my firearm? And I think the people like her are doing a great job in the community talking to people and letting them know, like, you have access. This is part of your citizenship. If you want to access it, you can. And I think about like my aunts, my sisters, and women in the community that I've talked to who is really no nice way to say it. I try to um keep things kosher, but who feels unsafe in our current climate. And I think that when I'm talking to women in the community, such as her, like when I'm in the community talking to people, this is a way that people are like getting their humanity back, getting access to just to be able to maneuver in their community like they want to. Again, and those aren't my words. These are people who I'm talking to in the community. Or this lady who owns um a barbershop on the west side of the community, on the west side of Chicago, Austin neighborhood. And she talked about how, pulling through a drive-through window, how someone came out and, you know, pulled out a gun on her for no reason, and how she felt unself safe and how she had to protect the people within her barbershop and her salon and her business. And that's what like led her to go get a firearm and want to protect the people around her. I think it's important for me to, when I'm talking about this, yes, center myself in it because that's why I'm working on it. But I think another part of this is about the people because this is what they're telling me. This is not things that I'm saying. And as an artist, I think about like how these subjects impact me as an artist in regards to what I choose, what I choose to talk about and what I feel like forced to talk about. And it brings me to this chart, Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs by Abram Maslow. And he really studied like this idea of like human motivation. And he talked about like this idea of getting to like the top of the pyramid, which is like self-actualization. And what I want to point to you, if you really look into that box of self-actualization, the very second bullet is creativity. And what this pyramid essentially says is that in order to work yourself up to the highest point of self-actualization, some basic needs need to be met. Physiological needs, safety needs, like food, water, shelter, health, protection, property. And when you start thinking about like firearms, like in communities like mine, like that I grew up in, the back of the yards community of Chicago, Inglewood community of Chicago, Austin neighborhood of Chicago, Roseland neighborhood, people are fighting for those basic things. And I want to see people from my community reach that idea of self-actualization. Um, And I think about myself like as an artist. I think about myself as an artist, and you see up there is like creativity, like the things that I'm able to talk about. Like I feel trapped by this in a way. I feel trapped to have to talk about this. Like I don't have, like I have to talk about it. Like I feel like in order to move on and to explore other topics within my life, like I have to talk about this because my safety and my physiological needs living where I live and have lived and know that people that live there are more immediately at threat. Um, Food, shelter, water, safety, um, is really at threat, especially living here where, gun violence is really big in Chicago. Um, those things are at threat. And when I made this image, I was scared. I remember making this image and I was scared. I didn't want to publish it. I don't think it's still not on my website. And I don't think I ever like put it on an exhibition or anything like that because it scared me. Like wow, like when I look at this image, I feel like on the visual level, people have everything that they need to classify him as a thug. He's black, he's wearing a hoodie, they're wearing all black and they have a gun in their hand. You know, But then again, I kind of bring you back to that iceberg model that the image is only 20% of what we see. After sitting down and talking to their family for hours, this man works for the Chicago Police Department. He's a mechanic. He fixed on the cars that keep our city safe. And with and I had to even stop myself. I even had to stop myself because talking to him, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to make this image. I want to tell them to switch clothes. I want to tell them like, let's switch the color. Let's do something else. But I almost had to check myself, like, wow, I was gonna play into the same stereotype that I'm trying to fight against, which is that there's a lot more under the iceberg. And after that, it's like they're also firearm instructors. They help people they help people get access to their FOI cards and train people and take them to the range and teach them how to access their firearms in a safe manner. But like it's kind of interesting, like even for myself and for some people who have looked at this image, it's like I gotta say all of these things to get them access to their humanity. And this is why I'm making these images. I could tell you about this lady, but I think um she could tell you about herself more than I can. So I'm gonna play an audio clip for you, and I'm gonna play an audio clip for you, and we'll go from there.
I was attacked by someone that I had broken up with. And I thought that I was able to fight this person off. I always thought that I was strong enough and I would use any means necessary if I was ever attacked. But when you're actually in that situation and you find that you're doing everything and you're still not able to get this person off of you. So after being attacked and stabbed, I wanted to find ways to protect myself and not ever feel as if I would be a victim and not have a way to protect myself or my family if needed. And when Illinois started to talk about concealed carry, that was one of the first ways that I started to feel that I could protect myself.
I wanted to share her story because for me, it really just reground me into why I'm making these images. Like that is really not about me at all. It's about like all of these stories that's underneath that iceberg that we don't get a chance to really hear about. You see the images and I say that my images are more mirrors than anything. Mirrors than anything. When you're looking at my image, a lot of times without like talks like this or discussion like this, you're actually only having your own life experiences reflected back at you. And it's interesting to see like when I'm at an exhibition or when I'm at a talk or somebody inbox me or emails me what they say. it's interesting to see what degree that they actually want to have a dialogue with me and kind of learn, or to what degree they repeat their own life experiences. And each is okay because I think that's just what photography and art does. You should like come to the piece with experiences, um, your own experiences. But that's why I'm so grateful for talks like this, and um, I'm so grateful to the Colorado Photographic Art Center for making space for this because it allows that other 80% to come in. And I want to share this image of my mom, who was a domestic violence victim. She actually lost her life to domestic violence. And I really want to put up this image again of the lady who was a domestic violence survivor. And when I talk about this idea of I'm not just working on these projects because I'm just trying to prove something. My life is intertwined into this. My life is intertwined into this. I remember looking through my family archive and I noticed something that my mom was wearing a carnation, and this lady who was a domestic violence survivor was she had carnations in her background. And when you actually look up what it means, a carnation means, it's actually a very strong flower, and it actually was the official flower for Mother's Day. And when I saw these two images, I'm like, wow, this for me, this isn't a coincidence. This isn't a coincidence. This is I should be making these images and seeing these images next to each other, seeing these carnations beside each other in both of these images kind of was like my mom was talking to me like, hey, like keep going, son. Like I like what you're doing. And I want to end the talk on that note. And yeah, thanks for attending my artist talk.
Thank you, Christian. That was really fabulous. I want to open it up for Q&A. If people have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or before we jump into those questions, I did want to ask, because we're the photo center, if you could talk a little bit more about your choice to photograph large format film. So for those who maybe don't know, what you're seeing on the edges of Christian's images are the film itself, and he's shooting large format. And I just, if you could touch a little on that too, like that it's not just digital, that that camera you showed kind of early on in your slideshow, is that like you're shooting with a large format? Maybe not that same exact one, but
It's kind of interesting. Again, it's very spiritually connected. But one, I think I grew a love for film photography. I grew a love for film photography, and on a very like just personal, selfish level, I feel like I just kind of like graduated through the mediums. I started off with 35 millimeter and progressed, and I was just like, oh, 8 by 10 was like this is where I need to be. I fell in love with the camera, but the reason why I think when I think about it, I think about like about a it's interesting that the Deerdorf camera that I have, that camera was actually made here in Chicago. And again, it's really kind of spiritual for me. Like when I think about the time that that image was made, I think about like groups of people who probably couldn't sh craft stories on a large scale the way that they want to using that camera. So it's kind of for me, it's like I'm mashing these times together for me. Like it's like I'm taking this camera where I know that it was like groups of people that couldn't just like hop on Instagram or email a curator and just like have access to be able to tell their story. I feel like I'm like mashing these time frames together. So everything is spiritual for me in that way.
yeah, that's great. So I'm just gonna read. Someone asked that this was fantastic, and where are you going next with your art?
Well, I just got my MFA from the art School of the Art Institute in Chicago. So I am thinking about art very differently. I started this project before art school. Um, before getting out the army. So I was thinking in a very specific way. I am working on a new body of work. I am working on a new body of work, and I'm not really ready to articulate that right now, whether it's about, but um, hey, send your email to and or follow me on Instagram and just like, you know, come and ride this journey with me. But I think I'm thinking more, I think I'm moving up this ladder of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like I feel like I'm moving further away from thinking about like necessity and protection of life, like that lower level. And I feel like I'm moving higher, higher up. And I think it's interesting to like, I don't want to say higher because it makes it seem like bad. Like I want to express my full levels of creativity. And I think now that I've done this and I've given myself permission to create in the exact way that I want to, where I'm at now with my creativity, I'm ready to express a different kind of creativity. So I kind of answered your question without answering your question the best that I could. So hopefully it was answered for you.
And someone else asked, have you photographed any people who carry non-lethal weapons like tasers or mace as opposed to firearms?
No, no, and mostly because again, like if I was to push the project to just like Mace or non-lethal, it'll have less to do with the Second Amendment. And like I said, like this is spiritual for me. I'm thinking about my ancestors, people who tried to start businesses after during the Reconstruction period, but black codes. I encourage you guys to go look these things up. Like, what are black codes? Black codes emerged to like stop people from owning business or protect their business with the firearm. So for me, it's spiritually connected. I felt like if I was to talk about like mace or something, I don't really understand how that connects back to my ancestors.
And I also just put a link to the book that Christian's referencing in the chat if anyone's interested. And then someone else asked, how did you connect with the subjects in the Arm Doesn't Mean Dangerous series? How did you make them feel comfortable in front of the camera?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Marissa. It was a journey because at the time when I was starting this, I was living in Texas. So most of the places I was going to were like gun ranges. And I always say the hardest thing to do is to go into like a white gun range and ask, hey, where's your black gun owners? It's like, whoa, what are you doing? You trying to write an article? What you doing? Like red flags came up. But like I was able to form relationships with these same people who I thought were going to be prejudiced to me, prejudiced to me. Like I was able to form relationships after I sat down with them, told them what I was doing, told them what I was interested in doing. Like they opened up their business to me. I was able to just like walk in, never have to pay, and it allowed me to connect with people, black gun owners that would periodically come to the gun ranges. So that's really how I connected with them. And I really want to add this in that everybody that I photographed I didn't, I would say probably 10% I met on day one and I photographed on day one. I started working on this on 2021. We're in 2025. Like everybody that I met with, it's a ongoing relationship. I interviewed them. I went home. I thought about what I read. I went to their home, had a conversation with them, did the audio interview. A lot of what you didn't see in this presentation a lot of what you didn't see in this presentation is a lot of audio interviews. I have audio interviews for a lot of people that I photographed because I interviewed them before I even photographed them. So
And some of those are part of the exhibition. So if you are able to come, we have QR codes and people are able to listen to some of those interviews, which I think are also very, I mean, you shared one this evening, and I think that adds a whole nother level when you're coming in and participating with the work. I also wanted, could you touch a little bit on, because in the exhibition we don't just have pictures, some of the portraits, we have some of kind of, more still life based images of the gun range or the shooting range, and you touched on that a little bit. But could you talk about that kind of experience? Because I know someone else in one of the interviews talks about that, the kind of experience of access to the gun range when where it is and where it's located in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, that was a very great observation, Samantha. There is someone that talked about this in the audio, and he talked about this idea of, hey, well, I just realized that I have this right. Where do I go to train? Like, all the gun ranges I go to, it looks like they don't want me to be there. I've been told all my life this wasn't for me. Where are the people that look like me? So I think it was important to like photograph the gun ranges, photograph the signs on the highways, you know, go inside people home and photograph. So like when people come into the exhibition, they can kind of like see the environment in which like people are operating under. And one image in particular I remember is of a um one one picture I really want to talk about is it's one sign, right? Where you could see on the top it says gun show. And it's like the typical like Texas thing where, they're having their gun show. But right under that, it's a word that says dedication, but it's spelled DAD. And it's from what I see, it appears to be a, a black father holding their black child. And I think like that juxtaposition, photographers love the word juxtaposition. I think, but that juxtaposition of like seeing like under this Texas climate of gun show, look, we like our guns. There is a very other subject that's being happening here. People are protecting their families, um, and taking the sensationalness away from just the guns and like looking at the family. So like seeing that image was like really important to for me when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I gotta photograph this.
Yeah. Someone asked, are there photographers that inspired you?
Oh, that's really good one. Um, I think it was definitely photographers that like inspire me then, and it's photographers that inspire me now. Um, I remember like before going to art school, like I will say like again, before going to art school, like I would look at this book like before I started every project, Mary Ellen Mark, I would look at this project like this book before I started because I just felt like um her portraiture was so intimate. The way that she was able to like dive into communities, I um really appreciate that. And I definitely can't not leave out Gordon Parks. I can't leave out Gordon Parks which was when I started looking for photographers. This was the first photographer that I found that looked like me. Um, it truly was. So he definitely, but thinking of photographers now, James, well, I guess he's not now, but James Vanderzee.
Mhm.
I'm literally pulling books off the shelf, right? It's crazy. James Vanderzee, he did a lot of portraiture within his community. So, and even my peers, like, there's peers that I feel like are making beautiful images. Um, Elena Parnell, a lot of photographers that I can't just think of, but I'm also inspired by my peers, people that's making work with me. And specifically, I get specifically inspired by photographers and artists who don't hold back. They're not thinking about what they should say at the right time, given a certain environment. They're saying and talking about what they know is personal to them and impacting people like them, and they have to give it out, regardless of whatever time we're in. Because the time is going to change. The time is going to change. And I think that's important for me. Like when I think of a project, I'm thinking about it uninformed first by the environment around me. I'm thinking about what impacts me. I create it, then I think about the environment around me. Because if I think about the environment first, I'll be scared to create. I'll be thinking about who's going to show my work and who's not going to show my work given a given target market. So like I feel very, I respect photographers who I could tell you did not think about the climate. You thought about the work. You thought about your personal experiences, and you started making work first.
And we have a couple just lovely comments about your passion for sharing your work and your interest in intellect about the pictures you make. And then Alana Purnell, who you just referenced, who's on the talk tonight, asked, "How do you decide what space to show your work in?"
Oh, that is a very good question. That is a very good question. I think real early on, I mean, even Samantha, when she approached me about this show, one of the first questions I asked is, why did you show me? Why do you want to show me? Um, and honestly, I believe that we talk about that 20% iceberg. I believe that the comment people who approach me is because they care about the work. They cared enough to look deeper than that 20% on the surface level, and they knew that this work was important. They knew that this work was important. And I just feel like when people approach me, they've kind of already done that self work because I believe that when you look at my images, your mind can just go into so many different spaces. So I find that when people come to me and want to show my work, they've already made up in their mind that this is something that I'm gonna fight for. This is something that I know that needs to be seen. And it's like I'm gonna push this forward. So I find that I don't really have to work too hard to get my work in certain spaces. And I like that because the people that support me comes to me and make their self available. And I appreciate that. So thank you, Samantha.
You're welcome. Happy to. Ed asked if when you were here in Denver, if you were able to see the Daoud Bay exhibit at the Denver Art Museum, which I think we missed because your trip was very quick.
Yeah, my
Quick.
trip was very trip, and now you just made me so sad.
And
You got made me so sad.
we had some other things that had to happen during the day on Saturday before the opening. So,
But I didn't. But I wish I would have known. But to answer your question, no. But Daewoo Bay work is amazing. He worked in Chicago for several years, still here, and it's just a good place to be making good. It's a good place to be making work.
absolutely. Well, I want to give a minute if anyone has any other burning questions they haven't asked yet. But if not, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, for giving the talk, for making the work. I think that I agree that having talks is such an important part of exhibits to be able to hear the artists speak from their perspective and to give space for that and space where, you can bring into conversation your other projects and not just, there's space for a gallery talk, but I think also the importance of um, talking like this. Ed asked email question mark. I don't Ed, what do you want Christian's email? I'll give that a second. Yes. Okay. I can It's up to you, Christian. I don't need to put your email in the chat for everyone, but I can share that with Ed later. So,
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you in Denver.
and
And
yeah,
of course, if you want my email, Samantha has your contact, so she could send it to you.
yeah.
Sure.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. As I said, this has been recorded, so it will be on that website probably by tomorrow. And if you haven't seen the exhibition, please make time to come to the gallery. We are open Tuesday through Friday, 11 to 5, and Saturdays, 12 to 4. And the show will be up until February 22nd.
Oh, I do want to put one thing. I like to stay connected with people that attend this talk because you guys took time out your day. So I'm gonna put my Instagram down here just in case anybody want to reach out. Um, hold on, let me get it typed up. Yeah, like I just like staying. This is my Instagram handle. So if you want to follow me on my page, please like take a picture, write it down. But I love connecting with people. I do respond, and yeah, let's stay connected. I view this as like a relationship. So reach out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Christian, and hope to see everybody at an event soon. It's Month of Photography in March, so there'll be lots more coming. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening. Have a good evening. Bye.